into the Dave Smith, Nick Fuentes podcast that was dropped, I think, yesterday or the day before, and just wanted to react to it. I had some thoughts. My first thought is I think it's interesting that he seems to be moving more to what I would call the mainstream podcasters like what is it? Candace had him on a month ago or so, maybe even 2 months ago. So I don't know if she's mainstream anymore, although she's very influential. But I know he was on the PBD podcast. Now he's on the Dave Smith podcast. And, I would say PBD and Dave Smith are some of the biggest podcasters out there, PBD's all over the place. Paul Bet-David and Dave Smith appears regularly on Joe Rogan and, a lot of different things. But I think this is very, very telling that he's moving more for the fringe to the mainstream. And I think there's some good things about this. I think there's room for hope and optimism with what this represents, but also there's some cautions too. But I feel more optimistic and hopeful about it than the cautions. And let me explain why. The whole idea about free speech is that, or at least from the way I understand it, is that when you really let people have freedom of thought and freedom of speech, the best ideals will eventually win out. It's kind of like why me as a Christian, I believe that having a biblical worldview, a biblical mindset, the Bible, I believe, is a representation, a manifestation of the thoughts and the heart of God. And that when you meditate on it, when you dive into it, you're literally immersing yourself in the mind of Christ, in the mind of God, and God's perspective on things. And, sorry, got a hair in my mouth. But I believe Western society, with all of its achievements, all of its, excellencies, all of the good things about it. Of course, there's bad things always, but all the good things about it are a product of, the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Christian thought, having a biblical worldview. At one point, people called it Christian civilization, the Western world. So anyways, I just believe that the best thoughts ultimately went out. The best arguments ultimately went out. Even the ideas about logic and rationale and reason, that in my mind is rooted in, a Christian worldview, a biblical worldview. I think God is the author of what is truly reasonable and rational. Even the scientific tradition that we've derived from the West, it should be based off of that. It should be based off the pursuit of truth. But of course, you can't have the pursuit of that, the discovery of that, if there's not a foundation for that, if there's not something that presupposes it. So that's why the further, science gets into atheism and anti-God and anti-Christ, the more illogical it gets, the more irrational it gets. You're supposed to just follow the science and believe the science. And really nowadays, particularly on the woke left and the crazy liberal scientific atheistic tradition, they're basically asking you to subscribe to their religion and just take it by faith, because absolutely they don't have rational science behind it. In fact, they discourage it many times. But anyways, I just think I'm not as concerned maybe as some people out there about someone like Nick Fuentes being platformed more by the mainstream, because I just believe that any thoughts or any arguments that he has that are bad and that are wrong, I just have hope that ultimately those will be exposed for what they really are as he continues to debate and continues to dialogue with people. I think a lot of times whenever we cancel people, when we on the right begin canceling people like the left does, it's rooted in fear, okay? And, there's a good type of fear. There's the fear of the Lord. There's the reverential awe of God that the Bible talks about. But then there's a demonic fear. There's a fear that's not good. The Greek word in the New Testament is phobia. It's a fear that shuts you down, that paralyzes you, or that causes you to do things that are not good, right? Irrational things that are not good. There's also an element of fear. There's a spirit of fear the Bible talks about in 2 Timothy, I believe, chapter 1, verse 7. And a spirit of fear will actually prophesy to you Satan's plan for your life. So, for instance, someone, may just be overwhelmed by this fear of something that's going to happen. But actually them thinking on that, entertaining those thoughts actually can be a part of the equation that actually causes that to happen. So literally sometimes people walk out the plan that Satan has for them because they give into a spirit of fear. So I just want to encourage people on the quote right, in America, don't have fear about things like this, about people like Nick Fuentes being platformed more in the mainstream, because I just believe that, like I just said, that the best arguments will win out, But here's another reason why, I feel hopeful and I feel encouraged by this is, I listened to Nick Fuentes on PBD, Paul Bet David. I listened to him on Candace, okay? And I listened to him on Dave, okay? Dave Smith, okay? And I noticed that he kind of changes based on who's in front of him, right? So if he knows that he's with someone that's more reasonable, more logical, more reserved, he kind of gets more reasonable himself. He kind of gets more reserved himself. If he's like when he was with Candace, I don't know, he kind of seemed to throw out there maybe some of his more radical views. And I think part of that was her prodding it out of him, like she brought it up. But even Paul Bet Davis brought up some things, but he just seemed to be more measured in his response. And here is my hope, okay? I'm a 40-year-old man, okay? I'm by no means old enough to be Nick's father, but I almost am, okay? Because I have a daughter that is in college now, and Nick's only 26. There's only a few difference in years, a little bit of difference in years between them. And I don't want to disparage him. I don't want to speak down to him at all. But I know this, that when you're a young person, okay, you are still more open to change, okay? A lot of times it's as you get older that you get more locked in and more set in your ways, and that's where you get the saying, it's hard to teach an old dog a new trick, right? But it's my hope, okay, that someone like Nick Fuentes, that if we invite him more back into the mainstream and we allow him to share his ideas and not discriminate against him and actually expose him to people that maybe have better ideas, like let's say on race relations and I don't know, maybe the Jews, whatever, right? If we allow him to be exposed to more of those people instead of excommunicating him from the public square in the sharing of ideas and thoughts and speech, that my hope is that he'll be influenced for the good, okay? And I could totally see that on the PBD podcast, okay? Paul Bet Davis, I think Paul PBD is 46, so he is old enough to be Nick's father, right? 20 years older than him. I think Nick is 26. And I could totally see that father's heart coming out through PBD for Nick Fuentes. And I could genuinely feel, and I think and discern, that PBD wants to help people like Nick because he sees his own children probably in Nick. It's impossible not to do that. And I have a heart for Nick Fuentes because it's not just Nick Fuentes, it's what he represents, okay? He represents a whole class of young white men in the West that have been spit on, that have been stepped on, that have been forgotten, that have really been persecuted in many ways. I'm sorry, some of you may not agree with that, but it's just the truth. It's not a coincidence that the suicide rates have exponentially risen among young white men, and young white men are not marrying at a rate that they used to because many of them are depressed, many of them are discouraged, many of them are just trapped in OnlyFans and in porn because they've been so beaten down, because they've been so targeted by the enemy. They quite literally are legally discriminated against. They do not have the same access and privileges that other people do that are part of special interest groups. And that's, some of the insanity of the legal discrimination that came out of like the civil rights era, for instance. I'm not about discrimination at all. I'm about equal opportunity for all. But when you set up a system to where if you're only of a certain race and you're only of a certain gender and you're only of a certain sexual orientation, you're the, if you fit into those interest groups, you're the only ones that get special privileges from the government. That is discrimination. That's exactly the very definition of it. But I don't just see Nick Fuentes. I see this whole group of young men in America, in the West, that have been forgotten and have been stepped on. And it's just not right, So, my hope, okay, and because I'm a Christian man, I'm a man of prayer, so I pray for people like Nick Fuentes, okay? My hope and my prayer is that the radical views that are on the fringe, that are out there, that are not sanctified, they haven't been thought through all the way, I'm praying that as he's invited more into the mainstream, that he'll rein more of those things in, and he'll just continue to grow and mature. And this is one of the problems with cancel culture, is we don't allow people to grow. We don't allow people to mature. I mean, he's a young man. He started like his channel, American First, when he was like 18 years old. I mean, come on, man. Can we not allow young men to mature? Can we not allow young men to make mistakes? Do we have to hold it against them indefinitely for the rest of their lives and just never give them a chance? I just think that's wrong. So I don't believe in cancel culture on the left. I don't believe in cancel culture on the right either. Although as a Christian minister, I do believe there's some people that are disqualified from ministry, but that's a whole other topic. But anyways, if you're a Christian out there, pray for someone like Nick Fuentes. Even if you think he's an evil, nasty man, evil person, the Bible tells us to pray for our enemies. And the Bible also tells us to pray for people in influence, okay? The Bible specifically says that in, I think it's 2 Timothy, where Paul said, pray for governmental leaders, pray for people of influence, okay, that you might have peace in the land. And there's no doubt that Nick Fuentes has a gift from God, that he has influence. He is a leader because he leads literally tens of thousands of young people, young men in particular. So whether you like it or not, he's a leader. So the Bible says, pray for our leaders that we may have peace in the land. And the Bible says that the heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord. And I'm just praying and believing that God will just continue to grab hold of Nick's heart and circumcise, cut away that which does not belong in his heart, and just continue to refine him and mature him. And that he would be a man of virtue, that he would be a man of God, that he would be a man of civility, and he'd be a force for good in our world. Okay, I was very encouraged with his response to the Charlie Kirk murder and assassination. He didn't take that moment to dunk on him or to do like the left was, to celebrate his murder. No, he got on there. He lamented the murder of a man that he considered a rival, even at times an enemy on the right. And he was very honorable of him, very kind, spoke of Charlie's virtues, spoke of Charlie, the good that Charlie did. And those are encouraging things, So anyways, I'm not going to allow people out there who are under a spirit of fear to influence my view of him. I don't think Nick Fuentes is his demon in skin. I don't think he's a neo-Nazi. I don't even really think he's a racist, because I see him hanging out with people like Kanye and like black people all the time, So how can you really be a racist if like you have friends of like every ethnicity? I mean, there was a time where real racists considered black people to be like descendants of apes and inferior human beings, and didn't even believe in interracial marriage because you're breeding, they believed that you were breeding with like some sort of animal species that wasn't even human. Like, that's real racism, okay? Like, that's just crazy racism, right? I think he has some views that are, definitely not, friendly at times, or definitely not, what's the word I'm looking for, politically correct. But I'm praying that as we give him room to grow, he will grow and he will mature. Anyways, I'm going on and on now, but I encourage you, go and watch it. Dave Smith interview with Nick Fuentes. Whether we like it or not, these are some influential people right now. And I pray for not only our governmental leaders, but I pray for people of influence in our culture. God bless you all. Oh, be sure to like and subscribe. Bless you.